Hey, friends, welcome to the Genius Way Show. I'm your host, Ben Hummel. It's good to have you here again today, this week. And today, our show is going to be about how to become better at being yourself and how to become more of who you already are. And that sounds pretty weird. Like when you think about it, the human is the only creature that needs to learn how to be who they are. Sounds pretty weird. If you look at any kind of animals, that's what we love about animals so much is they kind of come into our lives and they just do what they do and they don't have any kind of checks on something. Like if your dog wants to eat something, he'll just grab it. If he has to go to the bathroom, he'll let you know. There's no pretense about that. But for us, there's all these different ways that we kind of limit ourselves and judge ourselves and hold ourselves back from kind of naturally expressing. And so again, I'm not saying we pretend to be animals, but I'm saying that we have within us something that we were born with that is a blueprint of who we are meant to develop into. And we'll get into that in a minute. And that's basically the idea of genius. So what is that question? It's a really big question. When I say how to become more of who you already are, how to become better at being yourself. What is that self? That's the biggest question. People have been struggling with that for thousands and millions of years. What is the self? And that's way too big to get into today. But one thing for sure, if you're on a personal development journey, you may have had the experience sometimes of feeling like, well, I started to look into this and I saw some things about myself and they're not all great. And I wish I could put the genie back in the bottle, but that ship has sailed. We are out. We are out of the box. And then if you're really serious about it, you might have started to really do a self-improvement journey, a self-improvement work in your life. And so when you do the self-improvement, what I like to say is personal development rather than self-improvement. And here's why. If we are developing from something in us that's organically true, it's different than finding out that there's things that are not great about ourselves and then trying to fix that and improve. That's okay. It's fine. But there is something deeper than, let's say, our psychology, our problems, our patterns, something deeper that we can develop from that's more in line with actually who we are, right? So that's what I'm talking about here. So when you start on the self-awareness journey, the sky's the limit. Then when you start to learn about things about yourself, you're like, ooh, I wish I didn't know that. Now I have to do something about it. And that's both good and bad. If you go on the track of I have to do something about it, you're going to find more and more ways that you're not okay and more things to fix and fix and fix and fix. And again, that's fine. It's fine work. But here's another way. When we're born, before we learn anything, before we know what our name is, before we know who our parents are, before we know what our religion is, our country, our gender, before we know any of that, there's a blueprint for our life. There is a like a seed of expression for this life, and that's what we call the genius. And so your genius has within it everything it needs to fully express and have a fully meaningful and purposeful life and to have a really fulfilling experience as a human. But we forget about that very, very soon in our lives. And so the difference to me between personal development and self-improvement means we actually get in touch with the thing that we have already. Before we learn all the other stuff, we get in touch with that and pull that development forward. And that's exactly what my work in the Genius Way is all about. Pulling forward the sense of self that we had before we learned anything conditionally in our lives. So that's the major difference. So in this week, we're going to go over things that will help you to get to that level of experience, to get to that level of understanding of who you are, and to make a plan and a pathway to develop from there, to develop from that genius level of yourself. So I want to bring up an illustration here to kind of show you what I mean here. And so what this illustration is, it shows you the different ways that people try to self-develop. On the one end, this is a spectrum here. And on the one end of the spectrum, you can see the idea of a meditator, let's say. And the meditator and the idea of enlightenment is to realize, wow, I'm separate from existence. I need to get back to my connection with existence. And so I'm going to dissolve myself into divine consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, consciousness. And so over on that end of the spectrum, you'll see there's kind of like an annihilation of the self. Go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and you basically have a narcissist. You have the individual self pretending that everything is about them, and the sun revolves around them, the universe revolves around them. Everything is about themselves, and the sense of individuality has gone way off track. So, in between there, not dissolving into consciousness, not being a narcissist, in between there is the individual that is genius. In other words, this lifetime, you have this to say, you have this to express, and it's right there. It's connected to existence, but it's not about obliterating your identity. It's not about denying your individuality. It's about being more of that. And so from that place, we go a little bit forward on the spectrum, and we see we begin to get wounded by life. And wounding could mean anything. I'm not talking about a bomb. I'm not talking about trauma. Woundings can be misunderstandings about who we are, what our value is, what we're worth, what the importance of our life is. Those woundings can happen in all of those ways. And the trap is that with those woundings, we become sidetracked away from the original genius expression and end up spending our time, most of the time in our life, unless we catch it, trying to fix the things that went astray. And so the difference between fixing and developing is vast. So what can happen is you can catch the fact that you might be spending your time fixing yourself and trying to improve yourself when there's actually an aspect of you, a foundational aspect, that there's nothing wrong with. Yes, you're going to work out your issues, your communication issues, you work on your anxiety, depression, whatever that stuff is, yes, we all have different things like that. But we also all have a basis, a foundation of identity based in the fact that we have a genius. It is pre-programmed with everything we need to live a fulfilling life, and that we can go to that level consciously and develop that moving forward. That is the difference. Developing that instead of, or even including, working out your wounds. When you forget about the genius part, there's always something missing in your life, no matter how great you are at going through therapy and coaching and fixing yourself. If you don't get in touch with the genius, if you don't get in touch with that basic foundational existence and identity, something is always going to feel like it's missing in your life. And you would be right to feel that way. You're missing your foundational identity. That's where, getting to that place and developing from there, that's where the genius way comes in. So I've been a meditator for most of my adult life. And, when I started working on a meditation practice and being a good yogi and being a good spiritual person, what I found was that I was doing a bit of self-denial. I was realizing that there was something that, obviously I'm not enlightened. I'm not enlightened like these other people, um, like all the masters I heard about and all the spiritual people I heard about. And so basically, there's this weird inherent shame in not being more like them that I picked up. And so after a long time, I I realized it's better if I just be myself, no matter what that is. And through that path, I found the idea of genius and created the Genius Way. So what I'm sharing with you is actually a personal journey. So I want to tell you a little poem by a poet named Li Po. And this is kind of how I based my meditation philosophy. And it says, "The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains." And so for a long time, I thought that was so great. The mountain is permanent. The mountain is completely one with nature, one with existence. It's not separate. And so if I just sit here long enough, I will dissolve and only the mountain will be here. I will show that I myself am an illusion, and then I'll dissolve into that, and my consciousness will be merged with existence, and that's all good. And so that's fine and all, but there's a sense of denying oneself in that. And when we're denying ourselves, we're kind of denying existence. What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this person being who they are? What's wrong with me having a personality? What's wrong with me having choices? What's wrong with me having ideas of my own? There can't be anything wrong with that. But for a long time, I pushed that away. And so there's a new way that I like to see my life, and that is that I'm not a mistake. Even as my personality's formed, even as I've made mistakes, even as I go through clumsily on my path, this is not a mistake. And the only way I can find to remember that and to consciously be aware of that is to remember that I already had an existence before I learned all the stuff about which I was supposed to feel ashamed. And so that's a big difference there. The fact that you can be here and know that you're supposed to be here. Do you imagine how good that feels? I'm supposed to be here. I am meant to be here. Like that poem in the Desiderata. You're a child of the universe. You are nonetheless than the moon and the stars. You are meant to be here. That's a terrible paraphrase, but you get my point. You're meant to be here. And if you're meant to be here, there's something that you're meant to do. There are people that you're meant to touch. There are lessons you're meant to learn, and there are things that you're meant to express. And the Genius Way is about honest, organic self-expression. But to do that, you have to get down to that level of genius, that level of what I was brought here with, what I'm pre-programmed to express, not like a robot, but just as potential, that level of potential. So that's what's important here, getting to the level of potential and then expressing from there. So in order to do that, we have to engage in a lot of experimentation. And the experimentation comes in the form of moving after you get a creative impulse, moving after you get an impulse to just kind of be yourself. So an example of that I'll give you this morning. Every morning I go into my backyard. I love where I live. I'm in Southern California, and the sun is usually shining, and it's usually beautiful temperature. And I like to do some Qigong, these beautiful movements that get me in touch with my body and allow me to move into the day with awareness of energy, body awareness, and also some meditation. And so this morning I went out there and it was so beautiful. And I heard my neighbors in the backyard attached to mine, and they were doing whatever they're doing. And I had this impulse to take off my shirt and stand out in the sun and just feel that warmth of the sun on my bare skin. And then right after that impulse, I had uh, a feeling like, oh no, you're a 65-year-old guy. You can lose a few pounds, and the neighbors might see you. So that was what I learned. That's the shame part. That's the part where I wouldn't have followed the creative impulse. But instead, since I'm ready to talk to you guys about this right now, and I'm doing it myself, I took off my damn shirt. I know that might not seem like a big deal, but it's the difference between following that first little impulse of creativity, of expression, and then deciding not to listen to that second impulse or the second thing that checked the organic impulse. That original impulse, I listened to it this morning, and it was just beautiful and lovely. Yeah, I didn't subject my neighbors to having to look at me, but still, I listened to the first impulse. And so I want you to look into your life these days. When you're moving through something and trying to express yourself in an organic way, there are these little impulses that feel good to do them. And I want us to check and see how much you are allowing yourself to listen to those and express those things. Now, these expressions can't be at anybody else's expense or anything else's expense. If your expression is going to hurt someone or hurt something, then that's not cool. That's not what it's about. But the expression like I described this morning, I'm not hurting anybody by being in my backyard and taking off my shirt and feeling the sun. And whatever it is for you, there is an original thing that you can do to express yourself if you will just learn to listen to those little impulses and how they felt. Like when I got that impulse to take off my shirt, it was a feeling of like, oh, there's an openness. There's a like a warm, beautiful feeling. There was this energy around it that I wanted to kind of be in the sun and feel that natural sun on my body. And it felt really, really good before I even did it. Right. And so when you can follow those impulses and catch them, you'll be moving into your life from an organic space that you haven't stifled, that you haven't muted or muffled. And that is huge. So here it is. Making an original expression is how you experiment with finding your genius and finding that level of genius from which you're going to make this kind of ongoing original life expression. We've got to be able to give ourselves that amount of freedom to be more of ourselves, to be better at who we are. So I want to share a little quote with you by this Romanian philosopher named Emil Cioran. And it says, "Someone who fears ridicule will never go far for good or ill. They remain on this side of their talents. And even if they have a genius, they are doomed to mediocrity." Boy, that's pretty dark, Emil. But I really understand what he's saying. You know, if you do not take the chance and give people a chance to either like what you do or not like what you do, if you can't take that chance of being original, of being who you are, of being more authentic, because somebody might ridicule you, somebody might not agree with you, that's going to be your genius is going to be just out of your reach. Because when you're expressing your genius, one thing that might happen is that people around you who know you as a certain person that always does this and always does that, they're going to see a different part of you. They're going to see something that is unexpected, maybe out of character. It might be something uncomfortable for them. Not necessarily, but it's certainly different. And so if you're on this path of wanting to know who you are more deeply and expressing from that place, you absolutely have to take that risk. And again, I'm not proselytizing for doing crazy stuff. All I'm saying is, like that example I gave of taking off my shirt, it's a small example, but like that example, getting to the point where you're feeling that impulse and taking the chance to do it, because that's where the good stuff is. Finding that little impulse to express something new that feels important, taking the risk, and letting go of how anybody's going to see it. You certainly can't get past that. And like Emil says, if you don't do that, part of you is going to be doomed to mediocrity. Mediocrity, that's not the goal of this life. Nothing is born in this life to be mediocre, to just kind of hang out. Each thing, no matter what it is, has a life to express. It has something original to say. It has a purpose to be here, and that includes all of us humans. We're only here for a little while, even if you live for 120 years. That's still a short time. And in that time, in that limited time, built into that idea of having a limited amount of time is the fact that you get to say something. You get to say something to the world with your life. And it just so happens that saying that something also provides a sense of fulfillment to you, and it also provides some kind of upliftment for the people who get to witness whatever you're doing. So you don't have to be a great painter, you don't have to be a songwriter, you can do accounting, you can work in your garden, you can whatever it is, it doesn't matter, as long as it is what is in your genius to share. That's the important thing. And so everyone in that way, everyone here has a little bit of a mission. It's like an existential mandate. We came here to express something in particular, and our job is to try and get better at finding out what that is. So again, you're not creating something out of nothing. You're returning to, I've got something already. Let me look more closely at what that is. And then life takes on a whole different meaning, a whole different pattern. What your life becomes at that point is about experimenting with what you find. It becomes about taking chances of expression. It becomes about failing, but not failing. Failing and moving forward, and failing again and moving forward, and then succeeding, and then failing again. It doesn't matter. It's all part of this beautiful life journey where the effort is to try and be more of who you already are, not less, not something else, and not someone else. So in this path, there is no comparison. There's only one of you, there's one of me. That's all there's ever going to be. And if you don't bring out that genius in you, if you don't bring out your special qualities, your talents, your gifts, things that you're meant to express, they will go unexpressed. And that sucks. Don't let that happen. One of the things I wanted to share with you today was the idea that living this life is actually a sacred thing. It's something that when you do it, when you get to that part of your genius that you are meant to express in this life, when you do it, you're going to have the full cooperation of existence behind you. And again, this doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just means you're living the life that you were meant to live. You're living the life that you've been given, and that you are bringing out all the potential that you have and all the possibility you have to express this life as it is. So I want to share a poem by Walt Whitman. And this is how it goes. Oh me, oh life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless? Of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the objects mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all of the plotting and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of the rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, O me, sad, recurring, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. And so instead of me feeling like the mountain is the only thing that remains and I don't matter, this is more of my speed. Life exists in identity, the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. What's more beautiful than that? Making your life mean something, expressing what you organically have at your core in order to live a more fulfilling life. That's just beautiful. So there's the sentiment. There's the idea, right? How do you do that? How in the hell do you actually do what I've been talking about this whole time? So there are many techniques that I've developed in the Genius Way process, ways of looking at this aspect of yourself, of your genius, of your truer nature as an individual, ways of getting there from all kinds of different directions. And one of the things that you have to do in order to be more in touch with that is to realize that you have a presence to you. And that presence may or may not be indicative of what you actually have. The presence that you show up with in your life may be part of you working out wounds. It may be part of apologizing for yourself. Some of it might be trying to create something out of nothing. The main thing is your presence has a value. And if you're not in touch with your genius, if you're not in touch with like the basic organic nature of yourself, your presence is going to be lacking something. And this is not a judgment or criticism. What it means is that there is more that you can be present with. And so one of the things that I like to share is this presencing meditation that I've developed. In this meditation, you actually take up more space. Instead of dissolving into existence, you actually show up more. You take more space in the room, you physically show up, your presence shows up. All that is there to say that you belong here and that you exist on purpose. This is the difference here. When you experiment with your life, when you experiment with your expressions, and you're doing it on purpose, you get to learn something. That's how you learn. By stifling things, by criticizing yourself, by judging yourself, by being smaller than you actually are, nothing gets learned, and all that happens is you practice being small. And that's no way to live. So you're as big as you are, but make sure that you are stepping into that space of your own self as much as possible. And so what we're going to do here, I'm going to share this guided meditation with you. And it's called the Presencing Meditation. And in it, I will guide you through a way for you to become more present to your life, to take up the space that you deserve, to inhabit your world in the best way possible, and also to make sure that your verse, the thing that you came here to contribute to the world, doesn't go unnoticed or unexpressed. That's the main thing. So take a look at this meditation, and we'll see you on the other side. Feel your physical body occupying the space that you're in. Feel the chair supporting your weight, the floor supporting your chair, and the earth supporting the floor. Notice how the air that is slowly moving in and out of your lungs is happy to support and sustain you. See that within your entire body is a field of energy that enlivens and animates you. See how the energy is so boundless that it wants to move past the physical lines of your body and to take up even more space. Now watch as the energy that you feel within your body begins to expand past the physical boundary of your body. See your energetic body spreading for 12 inches outside of your physical body. Allow your energy to take up that space and notice how comfortable and natural it feels. Now slowly expand that energy outward for another few feet until your energetic body occupies 5 feet of space in all directions around your entire physical body. This space is you too. This is where you live too. Just spend some time feeling yourself as this 10-foot circle of energy with your physical body in the center, and it's all you. From this expanded place, you can see that your body is embedded in the energy identity of who you are. It's self-evident that you belong here, and that it's your task to inhabit all of this space every day in every situation as you live your life. And coming back into this present moment, and when you're ready, slowly open your eyes and return to this room, fully aware of how much space you naturally and deservedly occupy. So, how was that meditation for you? Were you able to feel yourself kind of expanding into more spaciousness, more presence in your life? So don't just leave this here as an experience. I want to encourage you to take whatever you gain from these guided meditations each week that I do and bring them into your life. Make them into something real. Make them into something that you experiment with. Take a chance and actually do this thing in your life. Like if you're walking outside, feel your feet on the ground. Know that the ground loves to uphold you and support you. When you're in a crowded elevator, you don't have to elbow people, but just be spacious, be substantial. Stand there and own your space. And wherever you go, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's with friends or with strangers or wherever you are, you're meant to be here. Take up the space that you occupy without being bashful about it. Take up the space. And again, it's not about pushing anybody out of the way. It's about owning the fact that you belong here. So I'm really wanting to get back to the idea of how to be more of yourself, how to become better at being yourself. And so we started talking about what does that actually mean? What is the self? And there are volumes and tomes written on this subject of what is the self? The big S, the small s, a million things. But for our purposes today, the self is the genius that you were born with that's in between oblivion and narcissism, the genius that is your content of expressive energy, that well from which your expressive energy comes. And that's really there. And unless you're willing to kind of check that out and tune into it, there's a whole bunch of what you are, who you really are, and what you're really about that goes unexpressed. And it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're feeling a lack of self-expression, if you're feeling stifled, if you're feeling like I don't know what I'm doing, or I lost traction, or if I don't have a direction, part of that is because you're not actually being your authentic self. And to do that is not to become that is not just to embrace some idea, but to actually work on it and practice it. Like that little example of me being in my backyard with my shirt off. Okay? You have to take this into your life and practice things. That makes all the difference. So whenever I'm talking about any kind of exercise or a poem or a saying by somebody, it's not just to remain here in your head. It needs to be taken all the way down to see, how can I apply this in my life? How can I literally do something different with my life that makes that big, spacious idea a reality, right? And you can't do that all at once, but you can do it a little bit at a time. Just a little bit at a time. Just today. Just this moment. This moment, I'm going to stand in the sun without my shirt. This moment, I'm going to take a chance and express something that I actually feel instead of holding it back. This moment, I'm actually going to sing instead of shutting my mouth. The reason that we need to express something, the reason that we need to let something out and take a chance, is because if we don't, we never know. When I used to be in a choir and in bands and sang a lot, and the people who never developed very well as singers, in my experience, were the people who always sang really quietly and didn't really take a chance of singing off key. Whereas somebody who would sing, really just sing right out, even if the sound, even if the tune was out of tune or they were off key or whatever, at least you can tell, oh, that was sour, that was a sharp note, and let me bring it down or let me bring it up. You know, you're going to know something when you take a chance. So just like singing with your life, taking the chance to express just what you have within you is what it's all about. And I really wish this for you. And, you know, as we go along in this show, this is what I'm going to be reminding you of, because this is the ultimate, absolutely important thing for people to know, to develop into who they truly are and become more of what they already are. So let's take another short little break, and then we'll come back with some inspiration.
Hi, this is Clara Capano, your host for Women Winning Their Way, where we talk about how you can create success all on your terms. Join us Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Limelight Network here on E360 TV.
And we're back. My wish for you this week is to take something that you learned in this episode and apply it to your life just for like a couple minutes a day. Remember that trying different things and experimenting with how to be more in touch with who you are, how to be more authentic, how to become more or better at being yourself. Practicing that every day is like the most important thing, because every day that you practice something, obviously you get better at it. So take something from this show, apply it to your life. I want to also invite you to write to me at ben@thegeniusway.com if you have questions or want any more clarification around anything that we go over in these shows. Eventually, we're going to be doing some workshops. We're going to be doing some Genius Pods I'll tell you what that is in the next episode. And just like to hear from you to see how you're enjoying this show. So I'm going to send you on your way with a little bit of inspiration, and then we're going to end out the show like we usually do. Every one of us faces the same ultimate question: who am I? And when we sincerely ask ourselves that question, our lives take a turn onto a path where the answer keeps changing the farther we walk down it. If one of the goals of your life is to live in the most authentic way, then the question of how to become better at being yourself has to be asked and sought after each day. Luckily, there's a reservoir of expressive energy at the level of your genius self that is a living answer to that question. But instead of answering in sentences and concepts, it shows up as self-expression, creativity, and uniqueness. Spending the time to remember your genius each day is a way of practicing this answer, a way of answering your calling, a way of sharing your inborn gifts. Your genius can only be original because existence has only created one of you. Do your best to celebrate that fact and make sure to share your gifts with the rest of us. Well, I hope you found something valuable in this show today to take with you into your life. Until next time, I want to invite you to stay curious, be kind to yourself, and remember, your genius has something to say.
Thanks for watching the Genius Way Show with Ben Hummel. Make sure to visit thegeniusway.com for the resources you need to help you on your personal life journey. You can contact Ben at ben@thegeniusway.com. And you can follow The Genius Way with Ben Hummel on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for streaming The Genius Way Show with Ben Hummel.